All right. Happy New Year to everybody, and welcome to the program. Let's go ahead and get started. So, a couple of things here. The code sections you see are the law, and that's what the basis of what we're doing is. Those are the general ones for information reporting across the board, so to speak. Now, given today's topic, within there's individual code sections that also come into play and matter. The most important in relation to today's would be 6045, okay? So you see there's 6041, provides that persons engaged in a trade or business have to report certain payments on an information return. But then from there, 6045 of the code specifically singles out attorney and settlement payments. And that was done for a variety of reasons, but most importantly because of the difficulties in getting the TIN, and of course, it's a really complicated situation. You got three parties to the transaction potentially. You don't know who's reporting to or not. We're going to talk about all that today. And also in terms of which payments are reportable and which aren't, we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the rare instances when an attorney is not reportable. And when I say attorney today, something else I want you to think about. That's, law firm, attorney, payments made to a client trust fund of an attorney. Those are all payments made to an attorney. Even if the law firm's billing for work done by a paralegal, that's still considered payments to an attorney. So please keep that in mind. It's a pretty broad carve out. I'm going to talk also about some of the other carve outs that relate to, in particular, payments reported on the 1099 miscellaneous later today. Just to give you a little bit of that as well, because obviously for some of you, well, for all of you, you're gearing up for reporting season the end of this month. Some of you, though, might not have the time to sit in another webinar between now and then. So I want to make sure I cover a broader range of bases. But of course, we're going to spend a significant chunk of our time on those attorney reporting situations, but try to help you guys out there. Beyond that, 6045 of the code, 6041, you see 6109, 3406. Those are all, it's tricky. There's no question about it, okay? So when you're confused by these issues, please make sure, start with instructions for forms, try to find information in IRS publications. It's written a little bit clearer. It's still IRS speak. I try to avoid using jargon when I'm doing these webinars, so keep that in mind as well. But occasionally I'll use the exact IRS terminology because it's important for you to understand that, even though in many cases it can be quite convoluted. Bottom line, also with I mentioned publications, there's treasury determinations, there's revenue procedures. Just know that the code is the law, okay? So, and then as are the regulations that are crafted to explain how the law is being administered. So if you start with the instructions for relevant forms and actual publications, I think you'll be on a better footing for understanding these concepts. But beyond that, if you run into a situation where you're dealing with an auditor or examiner, a proposed penalty, things like that, then you're going to be citing to the code as evidence for how that law applies to your particular facts and circumstances, and thus why you made the reporting decision you did for last year. And obviously, what we're trying to do here is help you make the correct reporting decisions as you complete, most pertinently, your 1099s this month and into next month and so on. Obviously, depending upon the box, this gets very tricky. And why don't we just go ahead and talk about that? A couple of things I also want to point out. There was just a big article in the New York Times the other day about, the IRS is swamped. They're trying to, they have all kinds of things to do, not least of which is the new tax law that just passed a few weeks ago. And just take all of that with a grain of salt, okay? I'm here to give you the inside information, so to speak. And so the New York Times isn't going through and looking at the IRS data book. They're looking at simpler things like, okay, the IRS budget basically hasn't moved in X number of years. And so adjusted for inflation, the IRS budget's been repeatedly cut over the last decade, is what that amounts to. And they're also looking at, they're not, they're not writing for you guys or for me. They're writing for a general readership. And so one of the things I want you to understand is it's not that they're lying. The IRS budget has, in real terms, been cut because it hasn't been increased and inflation's been going up every year. And there's no question that the IRS itself is dealing with a number of issues. I mean, you think about the healthcare law that was passed a few years back and brought into play. And so you have those duties related to the new forms 1094, 1095. You have the new forms 1099K a few years back with banking and P cards. And now you have this new tax law being processed